It started with silence, the kind that fills your lungs like poison when you've just lost everything. For 2 days, there was no word from Luna Colony, no comms, no distress signals. Just a blacked-out screen where there should have been 1,000 blinking life signs. At first, they told us it was a solar flare, then a systems glitch. But I knew better. I'd done 3 tours in the Belt Wars. I've heard silence like that before, always just before the bodies show up. When the Council's official probe finally sent back footage, every man on the command floor went still. Luna wasn't damaged. It was erased, glassed. What once held over 70,000 civilians, engineers, children, families, was now a cratered corpse of burning rock. No warning, no demands, no declaration of war, just annihilation. And floating just outside its orbit? A Council drone. Not Earth tech, not even close. That was the day humanity remembered why we never trusted the stars. The Galactic Council sent us condolences, apologies, promises of investigation. They called it a rogue faction. Said it was a miscommunication. Said the aliens behind it would face justice. Like we were idiots, like we'd wait. Earth's president wanted to hold the peace. The corporations begged for calm. But they weren't the ones who'd held their sons' ash-covered toys. They didn't scrape pieces of their wives off a melted titanium wall. I did. My name's Riker. Just Riker now. I stopped using my first name after Luna. Felt wrong keeping it when my wife and daughter no longer had theirs. I was discharged after the incident. Mentally unstable, they said. They were right. Something broke that day. But not in the way they thought. I didn't snap. I woke up. I stopped believing in unity, peace, or diplomacy. I stopped believing the lie that Earth was safe just because it sat in the Council's pocket. We were never equals in that room. Just tolerated, used when needed, mocked when convenient. But they forgot something. Something deep in the marrow of what makes us human. We remember. We hate. And we retaliate. I wasn't the only one. All over Earth, veterans, scientists, even black market engineers started forming whispers, private channels, supply runs to nowhere, salvage teams that never returned. Some said we were building a weapon. Others said we were planning to secede. Truth is, we were doing both. They called us radicals, fringe, terrorists, but that was before Ganymede. The day we blew up the Council embassy on Ganymede, in front of their cameras with a message carved into the crater, the galaxy stopped laughing. The message read, "This is only the beginning for Luna." And that was the last quiet day the Galactic Council ever knew. Their retaliation was expected. Fleets, sanctions, bounties. They sent a Council executor to Earth orbit demanding surrender. He said if we gave up the traitors, they'd consider mercy. I met his eyes through the comm screen. "Executor," I said, "you glassed our moon. You think we're scared of dying?" Then we launched his ship into the sun. Not with missiles, with him still on board, watching. What followed wasn't a war. It was something older, something bloodier. For every human they hunted down, we buried 10 of theirs. For every world they thought they controlled. We turned their AI against them, their own systems betraying their fleets mid-battle. We hit them with our worst, tech we weren't supposed to have, things cooked up in labs we never admitted existed, biologicals, nanoplague, EMP dust, and behind it all, me. The ghost they couldn't catch. The madman they blamed for turning humanity rabid. They were wrong. I didn't turn humanity into this. They did. They lit the match. I just gave it air. Fear doesn't come in screams. It comes in silence. Inside the chambers of the Galactic Council, fear wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. You could see it in their blinking gill flaps, their shifting limbs, the sudden absence of that smug confidence they all wore like ceremonial robes. For centuries, they'd ruled with barely disguised contempt for Earth. A primitive world, they called us. Savage. Loud. Emotion-driven. Useful only for labor, war muscle, and tech scraps. Now they whispered a different word. Riker. I wasn't special. Not really. I just stopped caring what they thought. I gave people permission to feel again. To stop apologizing for being angry. And now, the Council couldn't sleep. The Terran delegate, a species that didn't even have vocal cords until they were genetically upgraded by humans, stammered in synthetic translation as they screamed for containment. The Zal, 10-foot-tall lizards with armor for skin, wanted to launch full-scale extermination strikes on Earth. But the room didn't move. No votes, no action. Because in the last 2 months, Earth had done the unthinkable. We fought back, not with desperation, but with design. We weren't scrambling. We were orchestrating. And worst of all, we were winning. They didn't know how. Their fleets were superior, their weapons, centuries ahead in tech. But they didn't have one thing we did. Nothing left to lose. They made a mistake sending their spies to Earth. We didn't kill them, not immediately. We let them see. We let them record the forges beneath old Moscow, the AI labs deep under what used to be Nevada, the orbital platforms that weren't on any registry. We let them hear the war chants in the undercities, the recruitment lines stretching for blocks, children learning how to hold a plasma rifle before they hit puberty. Then we let the spies return. We wanted the Council to see what we were building. Fear was part of the plan. Fear was the weapon. Back in the Forge, our classified war zone orbiting Jupiter, I stood in silence as they activated Project Tomb. No one cheered. No one smiled. We just watched as the simulation ran its final protocol. Project Tomb complete, said the AI. Target acquisition, confirmed. Subspace tunnels, synchronized. Launch window 5.7 days. Tomb, tactical orbital mass bombardment. But this wasn't some glorified missile strike. Tomb wasn't a weapon. It was a sentence. We'd hacked into the Council's own gate network, subspace corridors that allowed instant travel between core planets. One gate, one jump, and you were across the galaxy. It was their greatest strength. So we made it their greatest weakness. We'd weaponized the gates. You see, the Council never expected anyone to send a weapon through those corridors. Too unstable. Too dangerous. One wrong calculation and you'd collapse the entire network. So we did exactly that. On purpose, we loaded their gates with dark matter payloads. Once launched, the energy signature would mirror their own ships, pass through unnoticed until detonation. The result? A gravitational implosion. Not just explosions, but voids. Planets gone. Moons ripped apart. Stars collapsing in on themselves. We called it Tomb because that's what we were giving them. Graves. And we were ready to dig 1,000. The Council tried to reason with us again. This time they sent an envoy. Not a soldier, but a translator drone programmed with the voice of what they thought would be our most sympathetic ally. Some half-blood diplomat who once lived on Earth. The message was simple. This can still stop. My response? No, it can't. They'd already murdered Luna. They'd already scorched our skies, erased our children. There was no peace, not anymore. So we launched Tomb Phase 1. 3 gates. 3 detonations. The core planets of Virex, Hallen, and Zar, gone. Hundreds of millions of alien lives silenced in seconds. The footage hit the Council chambers like a seismic bomb. Their own transmission logs showed the origin gate, Earth's hacked corridor. The silence that followed was beautiful. And then the screaming started. But it wasn't just about the bombs. That's what they never understood. Humans don't fight wars just to win. We fight to make you feel what we felt. For every planet they erased, we erased 3. For every soldier they sent, we hacked their suits and made them shoot each other. For every insult, we carved new messages into their skies. You taught us fear, now we teach you fire. They sent assassins after me, mercs, turncoats. I gutted one with his own blade. I dropped another into a deoxygenated vent and watched him claw at his throat until he stopped moving. By then, they'd started calling me a myth, said I was just a symbol, a fabrication by Earth's resistance to spread terror. Let them believe that. Because what's more terrifying than a myth you can't kill? But fear is a double-edged sword. Because as Earth rose, as we burned brighter and bloodier, not all humans agreed. A faction called the Purists began surfacing. They believed we should have never joined the stars, that Earth should return to its own, isolate, and heal. They hated me more than the Council did. Called me a planet killer, a revenge junkie, said I was dragging our species into extinction. They weren't entirely wrong. But it was already too late. We were in too deep. We'd become the monster we feared. But hell, if we were going to go extinct, we were taking the whole damned galaxy with us. Inside the Council's deepest command nexus, the Atraxis core, panic spread like wildfire. Delegates fought, fistfights broke out. Species that hadn't seen combat in 1,000 years were suddenly activating conscription programs. And the biggest fear? We still hadn't deployed the full tomb arsenal. They had no idea how many warheads we had left. Every day they hesitated, wondering if the next gate activation would be their last. They started shutting down gates, abandoning planets, evacuating colonies. Their own people began rioting, afraid of becoming targets. Planets started leaving the Council altogether, defecting, in hopes that maybe, just maybe, Earth would spare them. Earth didn't. This wasn't about mercy. It was about memory. The worst moment for them came 3 weeks after the Virex detonation. That's when they discovered Project Noose. Noose was never meant to be used. It was built as a backup, a contingency if the Council ever tried to glass Earth directly again. But they triggered it early. See, they sent a stealth fleet toward Earth, hoping to orbit drop planet crackers and end us in one final strike. What they didn't know was that Noose was already live. The moment their ships entered our upper atmosphere, their drives failed. Their weapons shut down. Not jammed, reprogrammed. Then their ships turned and fired on each other. The last thing one of their captains saw was his own cruiser turning back toward him at max burn. The debris rained down in front of Earth's moon, the very spot they once destroyed. We broadcast the footage back to the Council chambers, with only one message: we don't forgive. I sat alone that night, watching the stars from an abandoned observation deck. I used to love the stars. They reminded me of my daughter. She used to trace constellations on our ceiling with that cheap glow sticker kit. I still remembered her favorite, the crooked one. The one she said looked like a dragon missing its wings. She called it the Broken Fire. Now all I could think about was how many stars I'd burned in her name. Somewhere deep inside me, something whispered that maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't have wanted this. But that voice was small. The louder one? It kept screaming. Make them pay. And I wasn't done yet. I never planned to bring the war into their sacred chambers. That place was untouchable, the center of the galaxy's order, a monument to supposed civilization. But they shattered our order first. They taught us that sacred places mean nothing when you're on the losing side. So we took aim at the one thing they never thought we'd reach: the Pillar of Accord. Built in orbit around the core star of the Helios system, the pillar was where laws were passed, alliances formed, species recognized. A floating citadel made of ivory-white alloy, guarded by a defense grid older than most civilizations in the galaxy. Untouchable. Until we touched it. It started with whispers. Council guards were disappearing, not in battle, not in mutiny, but vanishing. No signs of struggle, no blood, just empty gear, empty beds, empty eyes on the ones who remained. Then came the glitches, hollow consoles stuttering. Security doors opening without authorization, translators repeating messages that were never spoken. One delegate, some fish-faced bureaucrat from the inner ring, screamed on the floor of the chamber, ranting about voices in the walls and humans living inside the lights. They laughed at him until he clawed his own face off trying to remove the tracking chips. They stopped laughing after that. You see, Project Tomb was just our hammer. But Project Shadow? That was our scalpel. Engineered by defected Council AI specialists and Earth's most ruthless black site engineers, Shadow was a virus, not digital, but human. Operatives trained not to fight, but to haunt, to infiltrate, destabilize, unravel from within. We didn't just send soldiers to the Council. We sent ghosts, people with no past, no names, no DNA left behind. Raised in silence, trained in madness. Their goal wasn't to kill, it was to make them afraid to exist. They moved through air ducts, maintenance shafts, and blind spots in the Council's surveillance grid. We didn't have to guess where those blind spots were. We helped build their security decades ago. Another cheap human labor deal they thought they'd never regret. Now they were trapped inside a house we helped design. And it was on fire. I received the first field report from Shadow Agent 7 during a blackout period, encrypted inside a Council distress signal. The message was 4 words long. Phase 1. Panic achieved. No elaboration, no details. But I already knew what that meant. They started finding messages carved into their walls, in languages they didn't know we'd deciphered. We're inside. You killed Luna. We learned from you. A Zal war general slit his own throat during a council address, live in front of 73 delegates after receiving a personal comm. The message was just a video, grainy, shaking, of his homeworld, showing a shadow moving through his child's bedroom. The child wasn't touched. That would have been too merciful. We were there to unmake their certainty. The illusion that they were in control? Gone. I stood in a chamber beneath Earth's surface, inside what was left of the Moscow Deep Vault. The room was cold, not by temperature, but by silence. It was where the real war was coordinated now. No generals, no politics, just execution. Screens lined the room. Not battle maps, reactions, live feeds from the council chambers, from panic shelters. From alien cities where the civilians now rioted against their leaders, screaming for someone to stop the wrath of Earth. But no one could, because we weren't after their armies. We were after their belief that humanity would stay in its place. We shattered that belief, and now the pieces were cutting through their throats. I watched footage from inside the council's medical wing. A Harlan ambassador, usually serene, practically meditative, was restrained to a metal table, sobbing in pulses of colored light. Her body twitched with trauma as she described a human-shaped figure that crawled out of her data terminal. No one believed her, until they found her guards dead, their throats stuffed with Terran soil. You want psychological warfare? That was just Tuesday for us. They tried retaliation again. This time not with bombs or fleets, but with diplomacy. They sent an emergency envoy to Earth orbit. A single ship, unarmed, broadcasting nothing but the old council code for peace. We shot it down, not because we couldn't hear it, but because Luna never got a chance to speak either. The council grew paranoid. Species turned on each other. Accusations of betrayal flooded their chambers. Security doubled, tripled. They replaced organic guards with drones, purged their own data archives to stop our infiltration. None of it worked, because Shadow wasn't just a program, it was a mindset. And by now, millions of humans carried it. Dock workers on Zendar, cooks on Drellin warships, janitors cleaning council chambers. They were all part of it. They didn't need orders. They just remembered. They remembered Luna and the council's silence. That was all they needed to act. 2 weeks later, the council tried to evacuate the Pillar of Accord. Too late. When their escape cruisers reached the edge of the star system, they found every gate offline. Then a single transmission echoed across the emergency band. The council dies where it ruled. I gave the order. Shadow Phase 2 activated. Every corridor of the pillar filled with neurosmoke, not toxic, but hallucinogenic, designed to attack species-specific neurotransmitters. The result? Panic. Pure animal fear. High-ranking officials trampled each other trying to flee their own minds. Delegates started biting, clawing, howling. A Zorak Prime, one of the oldest council leaders, fell to his knees and begged for his childhood pet to forgive him while gouging out his own eye. We watched it all. The feeds broadcast to every screen on Earth, so no one would ever forget what real justice looks like. I suited up that day. Not as a commander, not as a leader, as the executioner. I boarded our stealth cruiser, slipped past what was left of the Council's orbital defense, which by then was barely holding itself together, and walked through the main gates of the Pillar of Accord. Unchallenged, unopposed, because they weren't soldiers anymore. They were shadows, the kind that only exist when something bright has burned them into place. And we were the fire. I walked into the grand chamber, the place where Earth had once begged for recognition, where we'd been called barbaric, unstable, useful in small numbers. Now the seats were empty, overturned, soaked in blood. And on the center platform, surrounded by broken tech and flickering banners, sat the last living council chancellor. He didn't look like a ruler anymore. He looked like a beaten animal. His voice trembled. "You've won," he said. "What now?" I stood in silence. Then I handed him a data chip. On it was footage, not of battle, not of war, but of Luna, children laughing, families smiling, engineers at work. My daughter, spinning under artificial gravity, giggling as she tried to catch floating droplets of water. Then, the strike, the fire, the screams. I said nothing as he watched it. When the video ended, I looked at him, looked into those alien eyes that once saw us as nothing but tools, and I asked one question. Was it worth it? He didn't answer. He just wept. And I walked out. We didn't kill him, not because we pitied him, but because some wounds are louder when they stay open. By the end of the cycle, the Council no longer existed. Worlds seceded, alliances collapsed, fleets disbanded. What was once an empire was now a warning. The galaxy learned 2 things. 1. Never underestimate a species with nothing left to lose. 2. And never forget what happens when you make Earth bleed. Back on Earth, things were quieter. Not peaceful, just quieter. I stood on a ridge overlooking what used to be a city. Rebuilding had started. Slowly, painfully. But it was something. A small boy walked up to me once. Couldn't have been older than 7. He asked, "Did we win?" I looked at him. At his dirty face, his half-repaired prosthetic leg, the scars that ran too deep for his age, and I told him the truth. "No, we survived." He nodded, and somehow that was enough. I always thought the hardest part would be the fight. But it wasn't. It was what came after. There's a silence that comes when the screaming ends. It's not peaceful. It's not victorious. It's a silence that sounds like regret, like old ghosts breathing down your neck. I stood on the fractured edge of what was once New Berlin, now reduced to rubble and rebar. Wind howled through broken towers like the dead singing lullabies. Some called this victory. But what the hell is victory when half the world doesn't know how to feel anything anymore? 2 months after the collapse of the Galactic Council, humanity was no longer feared. We were hated. By the ones who survived us, by the ones who once whispered about our resilience and tenacity. They stopped whispering. Now they cursed our name openly. Across a galaxy still bleeding from the war we brought to their doorstep. And honestly, I didn't blame them. I'd been summoned to speak before the Terran Unity Council, the temporary governing body formed to replace what was left of Earth's scattered governments. Most of them weren't soldiers. They hadn't seen what I'd seen. They'd read the reports, seen the broadcasts, analyzed the death counts, but they didn't feel it. They hadn't walked through the hollowed-out core of the Pillar of Accord and watched the last Chancellor of the Galaxy beg for his life through tears and broken bone. They hadn't stepped over the bodies of children from alien worlds, eyes wide open, staring into a sky that once promised peace. I had, and now they wanted answers. "We won the war, Riker," one of them said, middle-aged, clean suit. Not a trace of battlefield dirt on him. "But we can't build a future on ashes. We need to restore diplomatic ties, reopen trade routes, re-establish trust." Trust. That word felt like a punch to the ribs. I stood there in front of them, arms crossed, jaw tight. They wanted me to justify it, to soften the truth for them, to give them some narrative that made it easier to sleep at night. So I gave them the truth instead. "We didn't win a war," I said. "We ended a threat. There's a difference." Murmurs filled the room, politicians trading glances like they weren't sure if they should be offended or scared. "We brought the galaxy to its knees," another said, "and now they see us as tyrants." "They saw us as vermin before Luna burned," I snapped. "This isn't new. They didn't respect us then. They feared what they didn't understand." So we showed them. We gave them something real to fear. They didn't like hearing that. But they needed to, because the world they were trying to rebuild wasn't the one we had before. This Earth? This fractured, ash-stained world? It was built on revenge, not peace, and it was still bleeding. Outside the city ruins, camps sprawled like scars across the land, veterans with no homes, orphans who grew up speaking only the language of war, children playing pretend, not as explorers or pilots, but as executioners. I saw one little boy pretending to strap a bomb to his chest, shouting Luna's name like it was a battle cry. We didn't just win. We infected the next generation with our rage. But the consequences went deeper than Earth. Human colonies across the outer systems had grown emboldened. No longer under council control, they had their own ideas of justice. Some began taking revenge missions, not sanctioned, not approved. They targeted neutral planets, old allies of the Council, places that hadn't lifted a weapon but hadn't stopped the massacre either. They called it cleaning up the rot. I called it butchery. One of those colonies sent me a message. A soldier I once trained, a boy who used to call me Sir with pride in his eyes. He'd led a strike team into a peaceful Zarn village. No weapons, no soldiers, just civilians. He left behind a video. Standing over a pile of corpses, he looked directly into the lens. "For Luna," he said, and pulled the trigger on the last survivor, a child. I smashed the terminal after watching it. Not because I was angry at him, but because I'd created him. We all had. This wasn't a war anymore. It was a plague spreading through the veins of every man who'd ever held a weapon in Earth's name. and it was eating us from the inside out. The Unity Council begged me to help stop it. To speak to the outer colonies, they said, to tell them it's over. But how do you tell men who bled for revenge that the blood has dried? How do you put down a gun that's become your identity? You don't. You try. And sometimes, you fail. I went to the Maw, one of the largest off-Earth prison stations orbiting a dead star. It was where we'd been holding surviving council officials, alien war criminals, and human defectors who went too far, even by our standards. Inside one of the high-security cells sat Seren, a former diplomat from the pre-war era. Not human, something between a bird and a serpent. Once an advocate for human rights. She looked old now, feathers dull, eyes sunken. "You came to gloat?" she asked. "No." "Then what?" I stared at her through the glass. "We made a mistake." She tilted her head. "You mean the war?" "No," I said. "We won that. The mistake was thinking it would fix anything." She chuckled. Dry, hollow. "You thought victory would save your soul," she said. "Poor little human. Victory is just the start of the real decay." She wasn't wrong. News reached us days later that Europa Colony had declared independence, not from Earth, but from Unity itself. They'd formed a new banner, a new doctrine, the Ashborn. They called themselves the inheritors of true justice. Said the old Earth was too weak, too eager to apologize. They were preparing fleets, training children, declaring every surviving alien species as potential enemies. And they carried my name on their insignia, not as a warning, as a prophet. I stood alone again, watching Earth from orbit. Beneath me, cities struggled to rebuild. Governments held together with thread. Children with scars no amount of time could erase. We'd survived annihilation. We'd brought down an empire. But in doing so, we'd unleashed something even worse. Us. Because when you win a war by becoming a monster, the monster doesn't die with the war. It lives on, in whispers, in ashes, in every boy who dreams of fire, and every man who forgets how to live without a target. The war was over. But peace? Peace was just another battlefield. And I wasn't sure we had the strength to fight it. Not anymore. I watched the fleet rise from Europa like black teeth from a bleeding gum line. They didn't fly Terran flags. Not anymore. They'd crafted their own, a symbol etched in red, with a streak of ash gray across a cracked circle. No Earth, no unity, just flame and silence. They called themselves the Ashborn, and they carried my face on their banners, not as a warning, as a savior. The first message from them wasn't diplomatic. It was a broadcast, wideband, sent across multiple systems, translated in every known galactic tongue. The voice wasn't mine, but it tried to be, clipped, controlled, cold. Earth hesitated, Earth begged, Earth forgave. But we, the Ashborn, do not. There will be no more treaties, no more counsel, no more mercy. Let the stars remember who taught them fear. Then the screen cut to static, and behind it the footage played. A Zarn orphanage, a civilian outpost, unarmed, peaceful, burning. Civilians running from orbital fire as Ashborn drones swept the streets clean. A child screaming, trying to pull her sibling from the rubble. She looked no older than mine once did. Then the blast came. The screen went black. Then came 2 words. For Luna. I didn't flinch when I saw it. I didn't curse. I didn't scream. I just stood there, jaw tight, eyes dry, with a sickness in my chest that wouldn't leave. Like acid. Like guilt that had festered too long. They were using my grief as a weapon. Worse, they were using my daughter's death as a slogan for murder. This wasn't justice anymore. It was a virus. And it had my name on it. The Terran Unity Council called me in again. This time there were no smug glances, no bureaucracy, just fear. "They're growing," the Chancellor said, voice low. "Over a dozen colonies have declared allegiance. More are sympathetic. They're promising protection, food, order. Even Earth loyalists are defecting." "They've got weapons Earth doesn't," another added. "Experimental tech, reverse-engineered council prototypes, things even we haven't seen before." "They're not just another faction," someone else said. "They're a belief." They looked at me, then. All of them. Like maybe I had the answer. Like maybe I could flip a switch and stop it all. Because they forgot one thing. I didn't start a movement. I started a war, and war doesn't end because you ask it nicely. I left the council chamber in silence. No one stopped me. No one dared. Because in their eyes, I was still Riker, the man who broke the council. But the truth was uglier. I wasn't a soldier anymore. I was a symbol that had been twisted until it bled. I flew alone to one of the Outer Ring colonies, an old mining world named Draymar 9. It had declared for the Ashborn last week. Communications were down. Surveillance gone dark. No official presence remained. But I knew something was there. I could feel it. I landed in the ruins of what used to be a supply outpost. The air stunk of smoke and rot. There were no guards at the gates, no checkpoints, just silence. Then I heard it. Children singing. My stomach turned. I followed the sound through a cracked bulkhead, down a corridor lined with broken monitors and smeared handprints. And I found them. A dozen kids, maybe more, standing in a circle around an old hollow projector, singing a hymn. It wasn't religious, it was military. They sang the names of council planets, followed by a chant, burned, ashes, justified. Over and over. One of them wore a pin with my face on it, distorted into a skull, half mechanical, with fire in the eyes. He saw me, smiled. "You're the father," he said. I wanted to be sick. I didn't sleep that night, couldn't. I sat outside the ruined compound, staring at the stars I once fought under. They didn't look peaceful anymore. They looked distant, cold. Behind me, the wind carried another chant. Older kids this time. Drills, formation, combat response calls. They weren't training for defense. They were prepping for the next raid. I found one of their instructors, a man who claimed to have fought beside me during the early Luna reprisals. He called himself Commander Vex now. His face was lined with scars, some real, some carved there by choice. "We're doing what you started," he said. "You gave us the roadmap. You showed us what fear could accomplish. We just took it further." "This isn't what I fought for," he sneered. "Then you should have died back then. You made us gods, Riker. You think gods get to walk away?" I grabbed him by the throat. He didn't resist. "I didn't kill civilians. I didn't target children. You didn't have to. You showed us that sympathy is weakness." I let go, not because he was wrong, but because I had no rebuttal. Back on Earth, news broke that 3 Terran supply convoys were ambushed, not by alien remnants, by Ashborn patrol ships. The footage showed human-on-human combat, no quarter, no hesitation. A Unity soldier, barely 20. Executed mid-transmission with a shot to the back of the head. His last words, "But we're human." The Ashborn commander replied, "Not my kind." And that was the shift, the fracture. This wasn't about the council anymore. It was about purity. The Ashborn had drawn a line between those who carried the fire of vengeance and those who wanted to go back to diplomacy, forgiveness, rebuilding. They weren't trying to save Earth. They were trying to remake it. I returned to what was left of the Forge, the orbital facility where Project Tomb was born. It was abandoned now, cold, full of echoes. I walked through its halls, past the room where we detonated the first subspace bombs, past the control panels where Luna's revenge had first been scripted. And I found it, the wall where I carved the message after the first strike, "We don't forgive." I stared at it. Then I carved something beneath it. "But we have to stop." They found me there hours later. Ashborn ships, no warning. They didn't come to talk. They came to kill. I fought them. Not with an army, not with fleets. With my hands, my memory, my instinct. Old instincts don't die. They just wait. When the smoke cleared, 6 Ashborn soldiers were dead. The rest ran. One left behind a datapad. On it, a mission file. Target, Riker. Status, traitor to the flame. I sat in the silence of the forge for hours after that. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just breathed, slow, heavy, because the truth had finally sunk in. I wasn't the hero anymore. I wasn't the villain. I was the warning. The thing they'd point to when the next war burned. The thing people would whisper about when they taught their children how vengeance can rot even the purest purpose. I'd become what I hated. And the only thing left to do was stop what I created. No matter what it cost me, I always thought dying would be the price. But I was wrong. The real price was living long enough to see the people you saved become the monsters you once fought. The Ashborn didn't hide anymore. They didn't whisper in the shadows or strike from the dark. They paraded, they preached, they recruited in open channels now, and the sickest part? They quoted me like scripture, lines I once screamed in pain, in fury, now used as chants by children training for war. "Let fire be the law," they'd shout. "Let ash be the answer." I left Earth behind. Didn't tell the Council. Didn't ask permission. If I had, they'd have chained me to a desk and buried me behind 1,000 diplomatic walls, because they still wanted to believe they could fix this with words. But I knew better. This wasn't a political crisis. It was a doctrinal purge. The Ashborn didn't want peace. They wanted purity. I tracked their main vessel, the Ember Crown, through old supply routes once used during the early Retaliation years. It was a city ship. Massive, self-sustaining, capable of housing nearly 100,000 followers. Inside, they bred soldiers. Not just genetically, spiritually. Orphans, war survivors, colonists left behind by Earth, all trained from childhood in Ashborn doctrine. And they didn't just worship revenge. They worshipped me. I wore an old council officer's uniform, ragged and modified, not to blend in, but to insult them. Ashborn patrols picked me up outside the Helion drift. I let them. I had to get inside. The leader of the boarding team was a woman. Sharp eyes, sunken cheeks, hair shaved to the scalp. The tattoo of the Ashborn logo burned into the side of her neck. "Name?" she asked. I looked her in the eye. "Riker." She laughed. "Nice try, he's dead." I leaned forward so she could see the scar. The old one, the one from the council interrogation room after the Luna strikes, the one every real Ashborn file recorded. Her smile vanished. She didn't salute, didn't bow. She fell silent, like she'd just seen a ghost she wasn't sure she wanted back. "Take me to your leader," I said. They led me aboard the Ember Crown, but not as a prisoner, more like a relic, something holy. People stopped and stared, some saluted, some cried. A boy, no older than 10, dropped to his knees in front of me and said, "Your flame gave us purpose." I couldn't speak. What do you say to a child whose soul you helped twist? Inside, the ship was a cathedral, not to Earth, not to the stars, to vengeance, my image carved into the bulkheads, not as I am now, tired, broken, graying, but how they remembered me. Younger, angrier, fire in the eyes, blood on my fists, they'd turned my pain into liturgy. At the center of the crown, behind steel gates and guards in ceremonial ash-stained armor, sat their leader. Not Vex. He was a footnote now. A soldier who'd gotten them started but lacked the vision. This new one? He called himself Sovereign Flint. I recognized him. He was one of ours, a former tomb engineer, worked in black site logistics, always quiet, always watching. Now, He was draped in black robes, surrounded by chanting disciples. At his feet, captured delegates, bound, bruised, and gagged. Live sacrifices. "Riker," he said, standing, "I never thought I'd see you in the flesh again." "I didn't come for a reunion," I said. "I know. You came to kill me." He smiled. "Go ahead, but you'll only become stronger in their eyes." He gestured to the wall behind him, a giant mural of Luna's destruction, with my silhouette in front of it. "You're not a man anymore," he said. "You're a torch. The more you try to douse the flames, the more you burn." I stepped forward. "I didn't start this." He laughed. "No, but you gave it permission." I didn't shoot him. Not then. I needed more than his blood. I needed to break his story. Because the Ashborn didn't survive on weapons. They survived on myths. And I had to make them choke on mine. They gave me a place to sleep. Food. Rest. A bed woven from earth steel and alien fiber. I lay there staring at the ceiling, the hum of the ship like a pulse in my bones. And then I got up. I walked to the ship's internal broadcast chamber, used my clearance. The old codes still worked. My name still had weight. The technician looked at me, confused. "Global transmission?" he asked. "Now." The screen lit up. Ashborn systems across the galaxy, linked in. Millions watching, expecting a sermon. They got me. "This is Riker." Silence. Some gasped. Some dropped to their knees. Some began to weep. "You believe I started a holy war, that I gave your rage purpose, that I am your weapon." I paused. "I'm not." The technicians tried to cut the feed. I locked them out. I was a man who lost his daughter, who watched Luna burn, who watched his people be treated like dirt by a council that saw us as animals. I leaned into the lens. "I don't regret making them bleed." More silence. "But I regret what you've done with that blood." I showed them footage, not of our victories, of our crimes, Ashborn raids, civilian massacres, children burned in homes, terrified families gunned down while waving surrender flags. I let the footage speak. I let the screaming echo. Then I spoke again. "You say you fight for Luna. Then look these children in the eyes and tell them why." I stepped back and said the words they never expected to hear. "I am not your prophet. I am your mistake." And cut the feed. The ship erupted in chaos. Some cheered. Others screamed betrayal. Gunfire broke out in the eastern hangar, a mutiny by those who believed the Sovereign had betrayed the flame by letting me speak. Flint came for me personally. Guards at his side, fire in his eyes. "You think this changes anything?" he hissed. "You think truth matters to zealots?" "No," I said, raising my weapon. "But it matters to the ones who haven't rotted yet." The firefight was short. His guards fell. He tried to run. I shot him through the spine. Not a kill, a statement. Let them see him crawl. I left the Ember Crown in flames. The mutiny became a civil war. Half the Ashborn turned on themselves. The rest scattered. It wasn't over. Not yet. But it was cracked. And sometimes all it takes is a crack to bring down a god. Even a god built in your image. I returned to Earth weeks later. The council didn't welcome me back. Didn't thank me. Didn't hold a parade. But they didn't arrest me either. Because they knew I'd done the one thing their peace talks never could. I made the Ashborn look at themselves. And for the first time, they blinked. I stood on Luna's memorial site the next morning. No cameras, no press, just the ash, still clinging to the cratered rocks, the cold, silent reminder of where it all began. I dropped my old sidearm into the soil, the weapon that started it all. Then I said her name, once, soft, so she could hear it wherever she was. The war isn't over, but the flame, it's fading, and maybe that's enough for now. Some things don't die when you kill them. Belief, hate, a name. The Ashborn had lost their sovereign, their ship, their illusion of invincibility. But they hadn't lost their fire. What was left of them had scattered across the spiral arms, hunted, fractured, until they regrouped in a system Earth classified only as Omega Drift. No maps, no charts, no known colonies, just a black hole surrounded by dead stars and rumor. Perfect for ghosts. I got the call 2 weeks after the Ember Crown burned. Intel flagged a coded burst signal, same encryption used in the early Retaliation years. Buried beneath the message was a name I hadn't heard in a long time. Riven. He'd been one of ours. Special ops. Silent entry, sabotage, extraction. Always loyal, until the Ashborn got to him. No one knew where he went. Some said he died in a deep strike raid. Others said he was building something. Turns out they were right. He was building Oblivion Protocol. I landed in Omega Drift under blackout stealth. No signal, no ID. No comms. Just me, my armor, and a name they still feared, even in whispers. The system was graveyard quiet. Wreckage from failed ships floated like bones. Some human, some alien, some unidentifiable. What the Ashborn had built wasn't a colony. It was a temple. A monolithic structure orbiting the event horizon, rotating slowly, like it was watching me approach. Its shape was impossible. Jagged edges, uneven symmetry, curved lines that looked like they were bleeding light backwards. It wasn't built for life. It was built to end it. Inside, there were no guards. Just silence. Ashborn symbols carved into the walls, not in celebration. In desperation. Bloody handprints. Scratched-out mantras. They weren't organized anymore. They were dying. But not before they took us with them. I moved corridor to corridor, deeper into the heart of the temple. The air felt heavy, not just oxygen thin, wrong, like something bigger than death was breathing nearby. Then I saw it. Oblivion Protocol. It wasn't a bomb. Not in the traditional sense. It was a core built from hybrid tech. Council matter compression systems wrapped in Terran bioreactors and fueled by something that pulsed like a heartbeat. If it fired, it wouldn't just destroy Earth. It would erase it, a clean deletion, nothing left to bury, not even ash. And standing in front of it, hands locked into the control interface, was Riven. He hadn't aged much. Still sharp-eyed, still precise. But something behind his stare was gone. Like he'd replaced humanity with numbers. "Riker," he said, not turning. "You found us." "I always do." He smiled, faintly. "You're late. Earth dies in 19 minutes. I raised my weapon. He didn't flinch. "You helped build this," I said. He nodded. "And you helped inspire it." I stepped closer. "This isn't vengeance anymore. This is suicide." "No," he said. "This is balance." He turned then, eyes sharp. "You lit the galaxy on fire. You made fear holy. Do you really think peace was going to grow from that?" "I came here to stop you." "You can't stop an idea, Riker. You taught me that." I lowered my weapon, because words were the only thing I had left. "You think you're right," I said, "that by ending Earth, you erase the infection, that you're cleansing the galaxy of what I started." "I don't think," he said. "I know." I walked toward him slowly. "Then why haven't you fired yet?" He hesitated. Just a second. But it was enough. I saw it in his eyes, that last ember of doubt. "You're not doing this for justice," I said. "You're doing it because you're afraid." "Afraid of what?" "That if Earth survives, if I survive, you'll never matter." He stared. "You were never meant to lead," I said. "You were meant to follow. And the moment I left the path, you lost your compass. So you built a bomb to feel like a god." He raised his weapon. "You think you know me?" "I made you." He fired first. But he missed. I didn't. We clashed in silence. No war cries, no speeches, just muscle, rage, and regret. Two men forged in the same fire, now trying to smother the flames by choking each other to death. His blade tore through my shoulder, my elbow shattered his jaw. He fell, bleeding, crawling toward the console. I limped after him. We reached it together. His hand slammed the activation key. I pulled my pistol and put a round through it. Sparks flew. Systems screamed. The countdown stopped at 9. We both collapsed beside the core, gasping, broken. "You can't stop it forever," he said. "Maybe not." I pulled a small sphere from my belt. EMP ignition core. Pure burst tech. Single use. No reversals. "This ship goes down today." His eyes widened. "You'd destroy everything?" I nodded. "That's what it takes to kill a myth." I stood, fingers shaking, blood soaking my chest plate. He didn't move. He just watched as I placed the core against the reactor's housing. "Riker," I paused, "do you think she'd be proud?" I didn't answer, because I didn't know. I activated the core. The pulse gave me 5 minutes, just enough. I moved through the collapsing temple as alarms wailed and walls shook. Behind me, Riven's dream died. Ahead of me, stars blinked like old memories. I reached the hangar, took one of their skiffs, coded it for emergency escape, punched it through the dead drift as the temple began folding in on itself, then silence, then light. The explosion didn't bloom, it vanished, like the void sucked it inward, hungry, violent, final. Oblivion Protocol, the Ashbourne core, Riven, the temple, all gone, deleted, like they never existed. I drifted through space for 3 hours. No signal, no backup, just me, the dark, and whatever was left of my soul. Then Earth picked me up. The Unity Council didn't send a fleet, just a single ship, one pilot, didn't even speak, just helped me into the medbay, handed me a sealed letter, and walked away. I opened it in silence. Inside, one sentence. Sometimes, fire can burn itself out. Back on Earth, I walked Luna's ashes one more time. The memorial had grown. Not just for the fallen, but for the forgiven. My name wasn't on it. I didn't ask for it to be, because I wasn't one of the ones who should be remembered. I was the one who made remembering necessary. There's no ceremony for the last soldier walking off the field. No speeches, no parades, no tears, just quiet. A quiet that wraps around you like the last breath of a dying fire. Not warm, not cold, just empty. I walked through Earth's capital like a ghost in broad daylight. The city had changed, towers rebuilt, streets swept clean, holoscreens playing old news feeds of the council collapse, Ashbourne trials, Peace Day broadcasts. They called it a new era. Some believed it, some just needed to believe it. And me? I didn't believe anything anymore. I stopped wearing the old combat gear, left it behind in the shuttle after Omega Drift. Now it was just boots, plain pants, and a jacket too thin for the weather. I walked with a limp now. One leg never fully healed after the temple collapse. The shoulder still ached from the blade Riven drove through me. The medics offered cybernetics. I said no. Pain is proof you're still here. They built a statue. Not for me. Not directly. It stood in Luna's new memorial park, a garden grown from ash, ringed with black stones engraved with names of the lost. The statue was tall, humble, a soldier kneeling, helmet at his side, arms around 2 children carved in soft steel. No face, no name, just one phrase at the base. So they'd never feel what we did. I stood in front of it for hours. Tourists passed. Some looked at me. None recognized me. Good. I didn't want to be Riker anymore. He was too heavy to carry. I stayed in a small room above an old bar run by a vet named Bren. He didn't ask questions. Just nodded when he saw the limp and the eyes. He'd been in the Belt Wars, lost 3 sons to the Retaliation raids. Said he stopped believing in flags the day the council fell. We didn't talk much. Didn't need to. Sometimes broken men recognize each other by silence. The world was quieter now, but not peaceful. Too much blood in the soil. Too many memories in the cracks of buildings that didn't fall completely. The Unity Council released a statement every week about recovery, reconciliation, rebuilding. But in the alleys, kids still played war. In the cities, old veterans like me still carried scars no new peace could polish. And out in the fringe systems, there were still whispers, ash-born remnants, fanatics clinging to a dead flame. They weren't strong anymore, but hate doesn't need numbers, just memory. A girl found me one day near the park, maybe 17, sharp-eyed, wore a jacket with the Unity emblem and a black armband underneath. She stood in front of me, arms crossed. "You're him," she said. I didn't answer. "You're Riker." Still nothing. She stepped closer, pulled something from her pocket, a photograph frayed at the edges, showed it to me. A man, her father, one of the engineers who died building Project Tomb. "He believed in you," she said. "Said you were the only one who didn't flinch when it mattered." I looked at the photo. Quiet. "He died thinking the war made the world better," she continued. "Was he wrong?" I stared at her, not angry, just tired. "I don't know," I said, "but it made me worse." She didn't reply, just nodded, and walked away. Didn't look back. I didn't blame her. The council offered me a medal once, said they wanted to honor the man who broke the old world so the new one could be born. I declined. They sent it anyway. I left it in a box in Bren's back room, beside my service tags, my sidearm. And the photo of Luna Colony, burned at the edges, still showing my daughter mid-spin, laughing in artificial gravity. One night Bren sat beside me with 2 glasses and a bottle that hadn't seen sunlight in 20 years. He poured us both a shot. "You did it," he said, whatever it was. I didn't answer. He raised the glass. "Here's to endings." I raised mine, too. "Here's to remembering them." We drank in silence. Months passed. Earth stabilized. Aliens started coming back, traders, diplomats, a few ex-council species trying to negotiate new pacts. No more empires, no more chains, just conversations, fragile, honest. I didn't get involved, didn't trust myself near anything political. But I watched. And sometimes I hoped. I met an old enemy in a refugee station orbiting Saturn, a Zarn pilot. Used to fly Black Ops during the Council sieges. I'd watched his ship slaughter a dozen Terran cruisers during the Retaliation years. Now he handed out food to kids in battered uniforms. We locked eyes across the platform. No guns, no words, just a nod. We both remembered. And that was enough. The last time I stood at the Luna site, a little girl was there. She had bright eyes, full of fire, but not the kind I once carried. Not rage, not hate. Curiosity. She walked over, staring up at the statue. "Was that a real person?" she asked. "Maybe," I said. "What did he do?" "He tried to protect something," I said. "Did he?" I looked at her eyes, at the world behind them, and this time I answered. "Yes." She smiled and ran off to play. That night, I wrote a message. Didn't send it, just wrote it, then burned it. But the words mattered. They still do. To whoever comes after me, don't make me a hero. Don't make the fire holy. We bled because we forgot how to speak. We burned because we forgot how to heal. The war was never meant to define us. We survived. That's all. Now make something out of it. Something better. In the end, Riker didn't die in battle, didn't vanish into legend. He just walked away. Let the myth die with the flame. Let the future rise on its own terms. And finally, he rested.